Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Spark AR Christmas card tutorial. So as we sort of showed you in part 1, I've already created a variety of assets in Illustrator, and I'm just opening up a blank Spark AR project and we're going to start creating the effect from scratch. So I've got my card.jpg, which is going to act as my target tracker. I'm just going to import that. And I've also segmented all of my assets for my reindeer. There we go, let's just start that, so good. And sort those by name. There we go. So I've already created all my assets, so I've created my background, which is a separate texture again. I'm not going to import my animation yet, because I'm going to do that via the animation sequence. And I'm just also going to import my foreground, my trees into my scene as well. There we go, so we've got my card, my background, my hill front, and my two sets of trees. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to create this kind of cut-out card effect. Now, this is a relatively simple effect to achieve, and instead of the card popping out, we want to make it sort of go inside the card. So first off, I'm going to add my fixed target tracker, and this fixed target tracker will be our image that is being detected, and the texture for that will obviously be our card design. With our fixed target tracker selected, I'm just going to right click and add a plane, and I'm going to move this plane to a new position. So this is going to be my background plane, so I want it to be at 0, 0, and in my case I want it to be minus 0.19. So this is now at the back of my card. This could obviously be further, and the further back I put it, the bigger the scale I'll have to be to make sure it still fills my image accordingly. I'm just going to adjust my scale values. Because I made this card to be a perfect square, all of these planes should be kept as a square layout. So I was aware of that when I designed my card, that I wanted to keep everything to a certain scaled proportion. I'm going to obviously create a new material. This new material I'm going to call my background, obviously. Change it to be a flat. Just fix that spelling. There we go. So it's going to be a flat texture with my background asset imported. And I'm also going to rename my plane to background again, just for good practice. I'm going to right click on my target plane again and create another plane. And again, I'm going to adjust the values, but this time I want this one to be not quite as far back as the other one, so it's going to be negative 0.15 instead of 0.19. I'm going to up my scale to be 4.6, 4.6, 4.6, not 14. There we go. And this will be my back where my trees are, so my back mouse trees. So I'm going to create another new material and call this new material just back trees for my own sanity. Change this to be flat, and again choose my background trees. I'm going to turn alpha test on and rename this plane to be back trees as well. What I could do now is I could duplicate this, and I could just use this duplicated value plane and change it to be 0.13 instead of negative 0.15, and just adjust its scale to be 4.9 by 4.9 by 4.9, because this is closer, and this one actually I found scaling this up more than you'd think actually worked better for my design. So again, I've created a new material, change this to be flat. This is going to be my 4 trees, my foremost trees, and this is going to be there we go, tree front. And if I don't think it looks right, I can always adjust it afterwards. I think I'll do for now. I can always go back in and tweak that if I don't think it's correct. I now need to import my animation, so I'm going to go to Add Asset, Animation Sequence, choose File, and navigate to my animation, which I created in After Effects, which you could see in part 1. Select all of my frames, click open, and it should take a while to just import all those frames, like so. So 60 frames at 12 frames per second, so I'm going to adjust this FPS to be 12, and I want to just, again, on my target tracker, add a new plane. Adjust this one's plane to be 0.04, because I wanted this to actually be sort of adjusted on the Y position a little bit. And I'm going to make this negative 0.11. Now, the scale I'm going to adjust to be 3.03 on all of my axes. And again, if anything this is incorrect, I could always adjust it later on. Just create my new material. This new material I'm going to just rename to be reindeer. So this reindeer material, I'm going to choose a texture to be my animation sequence. And I can already tell my reindeer's out of position, so I'm just going to move it until it's sort of roughly in line with my original design. And I'm also going to just adjust its scale a little bit until it looks roughly right. I do want it to be slightly lower than it is on the original design, just because I need the foreground to cover it more because of the parallax effect that will happen when we start to move around this picture frame, essentially. Rename that plane to also be reindeer. So at all times I'm just trying to keep everything naming convention wise something that I can always go back to and tweak if I need to. This one's going to be my hill foreground, so this is the foremost layer that's going to cover up mistakes we make with our reindeer, essentially. It's going to be negative 0.10, and its scale is going to be 3.96 on all of its values. Like so. Create material. New material is going to be foreground. And I'll fix that spelling that. So I'll continue because it does wind me up. There we go. Change it slightly, change it to actually flat. Choose it to be my hill front. Again, turning on alpha test, making sure alpha test is turned on all of my materials if they're using PNGs, which they are. And I also know that with my reindeer animation I get a little bit of a weird artifacts going on, so I actually am also going to slightly increase the cutoff to be around 13-14 mark, just to remove some of the erroneous pixels I get. And again, that's just more to do with how this was created than anything. So again, I'm just going to create one more plane. Make sure this is attached to my target tracker. This is going to be my overall frame. So this is going to be 0.008. I'm just going to scale this up. Create a new material. This new material is going to be my frame. So I've basically realised that when I was creating this Christmas card, that if I looked at it from certain angles, you could sort of see where the layers hadn't quite been covering each other properly. So let me just import my frame that I created. So I'd created just a sort of standard cutout of a frame, so square with just a border. And I'm going to apply that to this here, make sure it's flat, alpha test turned on, so we can see everything that's below it. And if I just pan around to make sure everything's layered wise correctly, I can see already my frame's actually above my image, which I actually want to be behind, like so. And I'm also going to scale this down. Scale this down until it just creeps into view of my target tracker. So you can sort of see I've got this very faint kind of outline here where the frame sort of just overlaps the original target tracker. I want that to be the case. I might make it a little bit more get a bit more pronounced, and that way when I look at it from certain angles it will mask where the hills, for example, just cut off suddenly. If I was to do this again and to spend more time on it, I would make these hills longer, and I'll just use the occluding panels that we're going to create in a second to mask them. But again, I did create this fairly fast because the approval time at the moment for Spark AR FX is fairly long. So I'm just going to create some more planes, and these planes are going to basically act as my occluders. So I want to make sure that these are in front of my image target and basically in front of everything else. I'm going to move these to the sides, and just for the time being I'm going to take my frame off just so I can see my image target edges more clearly. Move my plane to be on the tippy toe corner of that, and I'm just going to scale this massively on all edges, like so, just anywhere that the camera could possibly pick up the edges. And I want to make sure I just bring it so it just clips over the very corner of my card. So try and keep it as in line with my card as I can. I'm going to create a new material, and this material I'm going to just rename Occluder. I'm going to make sure its opacity is set to 0, and this plane I've just created I'm going to create as a new layer so it's in front of everything, and now you can see it's hiding everything behind it, which is what we want. And I'm just going to duplicate that plane I've created, move it to the other side, and again so it just is in line with the very most edge of our card design. So about there. I'm going to duplicate these two planes. I'm going to rotate them 90 degrees on the Z-axis. I'm now going to move these so they are at the very top and bottom of my target tracker. There we go. So what these occluders will do is they'll basically act like a kind of mask, essentially. So if I put my frame back on just to check everything's still kind of okay. So we now have our kind of Christmas card effect where all these layers are sort of being hidden, and as soon as we used to deploy this onto our device we should be able to see that our Christmas card design is now augmented. So if we move our camera around we should be able to sort of see this silhouette effect, and this is where it does take a bit of trial and error and manual refinement. So every so often you will make your effect, deploy it, test it, and then readjust things as you see fit. So thinking about where it's going to be deployed, how the angles, what possible angles you need to compensate for, etc, etc. And that is how to create the most basic of AR Christmas cards imaginable. And what we'll look at in a second is some ways that we could improve this and add a bit more interactivity to it. You will notice, by the way, there is no text on this design. That reason for that is static text or text can throw up a red flag with the approval process, and to avoid that, for the purposes of time I just avoided all text in general. You can have text in your effect as long as the text is part of the design and moves. It can't be on the original target. They get very iffy about that. And likewise, it cannot be a branded design. So let's have a look at what we can do to make this design more interactive and a bit more cooler than just what it is at the moment. Okay, so one way we could make our Christmas card a bit more interactive is we could actually randomize the design and elements a bit more. So we could combine this with some random elements, which again we've covered in a previous video. So in this case I have, whenever this target is detected, it's going to randomly send out its pulse when it's found, and then if it ran the number to either 1 or 0, if it is 0 it shows the reindeer animation, and if it is 1 it will actually show, it's currently called reindeer but it's actually a owl animation. So let me just see if I can kick it into life a little bit. There we go. So if the value is 1, it will instead play this owl animation. So we could combine a number of these randomized elements, so we could have the colours change randomly, we could have different backgrounds, different elements, and build up a completely unique Christmas card just by having it, every time the card is detected, it randomizes what elements are shown and what elements are not, and we could create something that is truly unique every time that the device is pointed at it. But again, we need to obviously be aware of file sizes. So that's one way we could improve interactivity with this. We could also add some interactive object elements, so we could add a kind of UI to this. So if we was using Instagram, we could add a native UI using the JavaScript library, or if we was using Facebook, we could just add a rectangle to the canvas and position this, let's say, at the bottom. And we could scale this across a bit, create new material. So we could have this be a kind of button that kind of could indicate like opening a present, for example, and when you click on this, this also could play a sound or change animation sequence being played, for example. So that's one way. Another way we could add interactivity to our card and make it a bit more involved in what it is. So another thing we could do is we could work with 3D models and animation assets. So for this I'm just going to go to Mixamo and just choose a character from its library and just apply the animation and download it to my machine. So I've already gone to download, and I'd import my first one with the skin and then any of the animations I want to associate it without. So I've downloaded those onto my machine now. I'm just going to import my character into my scene, and because this animation is baked with the file, it will already be associated and this model's already been rigged. If you want to learn how to do rigging on your 3D models, I would recommend looking into a lot of Blender tutorials because there's some amazing work out there. So I'm just going to drag my character onto my target tracker, like so. I'm going to scale him down because he's way too big for what we need to do. I'm just going to position him down and in front of my target slightly, just so we can see this control system working. So as you can see, he's got a skeletal rig in there, he's in a T-pose. So if I was to select this character, you notice that if I go to its animation, there's no control selected. If I click on the drop down, it'll ask me to create a new animation controller, so I can create one from there. When I do that, if I scroll down to the bottom and I go to my animation playback controller, it's created a new one, and it will automatically apply the animation clip that's baked with it. So in this case, it's the Mixamo.com, which is this sort of capoeira dance. And I've also downloaded another dance called, which is a samba, so I'm just going to import that into my assets. And this one I didn't download the model with, I just downloaded the animation rig. So if we go back to our animation playback controller now and choose animation clip, we can change to the other one, and it should work. Oh god. Okay, he's decided to go a bit Slender Man on us. Wow, okay. That's interesting. That is very creepy. But yeah, as you can sort of see, we can change animation clip. And it shouldn't do this, it should actually be keeping the proportions to the rig. But it's decided to not do that on this occasion, which is most bizarre. Anyway, so let's just ignore the fact that it's gone into some sort of weird Slenderman thing and just focus on what we're looking at, is how we can control and change animations. So if we go to our patch editor, we can select our animation playback controller. I'm just going to change it back to the other one so we don't have this creepy nightmare fuel playing on our screen all the time. And I'm going to select my character in my scene, and where it says animation I'm going to click on the arrow next to that, and this will now be our animation that we're going to want to control. And the way we can control this is we could have it controlled via screen detection, screen tap, whether the target is there or not. You know, there's various ways we can control how this plays. I'm just going to go for screen tap because it's the quickest and easiest way of highlighting how you go about doing this. Although yours hopefully won't have that weird disproportionate skeletal horror going on. So we drag from the tap to a counter, because I want to count how many times the screen is tapped, and I want the maximum to be the number of animation clips I'm going to have, which in this case is 2. And then I'm going to link that to my option picker and change the option picker to be using animation data, and just hook that up to the animation file on the model. So every option that we want to have for animation clip needs to be linked to a separate animation controller. So I'm going to go to my animation playback controller down here that's created with that samba animation currently assigned to it. I'm just going to drag this into my patch editor and link this up to the first option on my option picker, and it should start applying it straight away because our value is 0, so the option playing should be the first one. I'm then going to create a second animation playback controller and assign this one to be the Nightmare Fuel animation, and then again link this to my second option on there. So now when I tap the screen it'll change between the two, and let's see if we can try and work out why it's doing this. I'll just link that in there for a second and reset. Okay, so it's stretching the animation out because it's linked to our target tracker by the look of it. Let's just double check if that's the case. Nope, it is just a incorrectly rigged export. Never mind. Again, I'm not going to spend time fixing that on this video, so just highlighting something extra you could do, and this will be down to the way that the animation was baked more than anything. So every time my screen is tapped, it's going to change between those two animations. But what if I wanted to only sort of change between the two and play the animation once? Well, what I need to do is I'm going to go to my animation playback controllers, turn off the loop option, so it'll play it once and then stop at its final frame, like so. And I need to now enable a reset option. So I'm going to select my animation controllers and add the reset patches to my scene. I click on the arrow on each of the animation controllers reset button and adding it to my patch editor like so, and then linking those to my screen tap or whatever action is going to be the initializer. So every time the screen is tapped it's going to reset and go back to the first frame, but it won't be playing it at the moment. So to play it we need to also from our screen tap add a switch, and instead of it being a flip I want it to just be a turn on. And then on each of those animation controllers I'm going to add the play patch to our patch editor and hook these up to my switch. So now when I tap it will reset to the first frame, play it all the way through once, stop on its final frame, and wait for it to be reset, which was done again by pressing the button or tapping the screen once more. In this case it's also switching to the second animation, which again is this weirdly distorted guy, and we'll look at how we can fix that possibly in a future video. But yeah, this is how you can sort of add more elements to your card. And this has just been a little bit of a kind of very short video. Like I said, we could do a lot more with this, and it's all down to how far you want to go. For me, I had to kind of make the card fairly basic due to time reasons more than anything. And I hope this has been of some use, and I hope you don't have nightmares. Goodbye.